Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
When the husband was riding in the car with a friend, he recounted his adventures with a girl, the details of which coincided with the. Today's story has a similar plot. Enjoy watching it. In the morning, I slipped out of bed and stood looking at my sleeping friend. As usual, she looked like an innocent angel with her blonde hair scattered around her head. I would never have guessed from her appearance how mischievous and daring she was, traits I loved about her, along with her generosity and sense of humor. It's no surprise she was one of the top saleswomen at the men's clothing chain where she worked. Besides being beautiful with a great figure, she could charm the birds from the trees. That's how we met. I went into her store, and she sold me a shirt. She completely blew me away. The next week, I came back, and she sold me the pants, then another shirt, and so it went on until I finally got up the courage to ask her out. The joke between us was that she only agreed because she was running out of things to sell to me. She says she loves the way my smile lights up my face, whatever that means. I honestly don't understand what she means. All I know is that every time she says that, I wince because I have that old toothpaste commercial running through my head all day. Why can't she say she likes my blue eyes, my tousled black hair, or maybe my intellect and personality? Better yet, my six-pack abs or my brilliant mind. I might not have been as cute as that guy from Game of Thrones she was so into, but hey, I wasn't a piece of meat either. But no, it was always a damn smile. With one last look at my sweet Lexi, a parody of my proverbial smile on my face, I headed to the bathroom. I returned to the bedroom to find Lexi still fast asleep. I sighed. If I had any sense, I would be jealous of her bed. She was clearly having a love affair with it and the dream. Her bottom lip looked soft and full from sleep, and I wanted to kiss her, but I suppressed my thoughts and instead leaned down and kissed her lightly on the forehead before grabbing my things and preparing to get dressed in the living room so as not to wake her. Dressed, I checked the refrigerator and pantry, not surprised that there was very little food in there. Housekeeping and cooking were not Lexi's forte, as my mother regularly stressed to me. Mom was horrified that I did most of the shopping and cooking when I stayed at Lexi's, even though the men's clothing boutique where Lexi worked was in a shopping center with 2 supermarkets, a specialty grocer, a butcher, and a deli. When Mom started talking about Lexi's lack of housekeeping skills, I would just shrug and either remind her how caring Lexi was to her grandmother or tell her that she should thank the gods that I listened to her when she tried to teach me how to cook and other life skills. I made myself some toast and logged into the Uber app on my phone to start my shift. Before I even reached the front door, the last piece of toast hanging from the corner of my mouth, I received a request for a ride from the airport to a hotel downtown. With a quick tap of my finger, I accepted the order and headed to my pride and joy, a fully restored 1967 Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud 3. Indeed, with its black paint, silver hood, luxurious red leather interior, and wood trim, it was too nice to carry people around town, but its uniqueness earned me many repeat customers who appreciated elegance, fine craftsmanship, and mechanics. The day passed quickly thanks to a lot of travel and little free time. Of course, this meant that I didn't have time to explore much between trips, but I was able to catch up on that while Lexi went to Melbourne for another visit to her sick grandmother. Plus, as usual, I needed money from my part-time job as an Uber driver to pay my half of the fee. I parked at my parents' house, tired and hungry after a 12-hour work shift. God, I hope my mother made one of her famous roast beef stews. Unlike Lexi, she had excellent domestic skills. Luck was on my side. There was not only roast beef stew on the menu but also her delicious potato casserole. And if my nose didn't deceive me, there was apple pie in the oven. Fantastic. All I had to do was quickly freshen up before taking my seat at the dinner table. "How was your day, Jamie?" my father asked. "Okay, Dad. Lots of trips and long ones, so good for the money and low on fuel costs." My father nodded approvingly. He was a great supporter of earning one's own living. He argued that what comes too easily is not valued or cherished, and that a little blood, sweat, and tears, along with some sacrifice, is the best way to teach a person to appreciate what he has. When I saved up half the value of a dilapidated Rolls-Royce, my mother thought I was crazy, but my father was a man of his word and gave away his half without blinking an eye. He even spent many Saturdays helping me find parts and restore it to its former glory. Now it was worth almost 10 times what we spent on it. Lexi teased me about my car being my mistress, but she loved being driven to church in such a fancy car. Dinner was spent in casual conversation, and when I finished eating, I excused myself to call Lexi. I never wanted a day to go by without hearing her sweet voice. "Hi, honey. How was your day?" "Okay, lots of traveling." "What have you been doing?" "A little bit. Had a good night's sleep, then did some household chores, watched a movie." "What movie?" Lexi named some chick flick, and I stopped listening while she gushed about how romantic it was. "Are you sure you don't want me to take you to the airport tomorrow morning? I have time before my lecture." "No, everything will be fine, Jamie. In fact, I'd better stop talking and go pack my things." I frowned. She had the whole day to pack and waited until the only time I was free to do it. I opened my mouth to comment but closed it again. There was no point in ending our last conversation before her trip to her grandmother with a quarrel. We'd had enough fights lately. "Okay, bye honey. See you at the end of the week. Love you." I opened my mouth again, this time to tell her I loved her, but before the words could leave my lips, she hung up. I shrugged, trying to shake off my irritation, reminding myself that she was probably nervous about all the last-minute things she needed to do before her trip. The sound of an incoming message woke me as the first rays of dawn penetrated the gap between the curtains. I rubbed my eyes and cursed myself for forgetting to turn off the sound on my smartphone the night before. Thinking it might be Lexi changing her mind about going to the airport, I grabbed my phone from the nightstand. The message was not from Lexi but a standard message from Uber asking about driver availability, since they had a driver shortage and high demand. Taking a quick look at the time, I replied in the affirmative, saying that I was available for about 3 hours. The response of gratitude came immediately, coinciding with the signal of a new message. My first trip was from the city center to the international terminal. In less than 10 minutes, I managed to throw on some clothes, pack my bag for university, brush my teeth, and grab my car keys. I stopped in the kitchen to leave a note for my parents, grab a handful of granola, and fill my water bottle. As I drove through nearly empty suburban streets toward the highway leading into the city, I reflected on my time as an Uber driver. I quite enjoyed it and now knew the city like the back of my hand. Plus, I met a lot of interesting people, some of whom could be useful after completing my engineering degree. One guy even asked me to ride around the block a few times while he explained a concept that helped me get a high grade on an essay in the subject. He wouldn't let me reduce the cost of the trip and even left me a generous tip along with his business card. Since the streets were relatively quiet due to the early hour, I got to the hotel fairly quickly. Once parked in the pickup area, I quickly texted the customer via Uber to let him know I was ready and waiting. 10 minutes passed with no sign of my passenger, and just as I was about to send a second message, a guy emerged from the building looking worried and tense. He looked around the landing zone, clearly searching for someone or something. I went out onto the sidewalk. Stephen Cummings, a smile of relief appeared on his face. "It's me. Sorry for making you wait. Checking out took longer than I expected." "It's okay. Let me help you with that," I said, taking the handle of his suitcase and walking towards the back of my car. I didn't like it when people threw their suitcases in the back seat, as their wheels often left marks on the upholstery. The easiest way to avoid this problem is to take their suitcases and place them in the trunk yourself. "Nice car, mate." "She's really beautiful," Stephen commented as he sat down in the back seat on the passenger side, immediately fastening his seatbelt. His sigh was heard, coinciding with the click of his seatbelt. I looked in the rearview mirror as I started the engine. He had his glasses in one hand and his head tilted back, eyes closed. "Is it a hard day ahead?" I asked. "Worst. We lost a major project that we thought we had in our pocket to a competitor, and now I have to go back and tell the board. I just hope they don't kill the messenger. Besides, it was my project." "Well, it's a nightmare." "Of course, a nightmare. This probably means I can forget about the annual bonus, which in turn means giving up the cruise my wife was dreaming of." "Don't give up just yet, buddy. Miracles happen." Even to my ears, it sounded empty and unconvincing. Stephen fell silent and apparently dozed off. I concentrated on steering the car through the increasingly busy traffic. "Stephen, we're almost there," I said quietly. At my words, Stephen woke up and looked around. Wow, that was fast. I stopped behind the taxi, switched gears, and put on the handbrake. I met Stephen at the back of the car. "Buddy, I don't want to butt in, but I was thinking about your problem. If it were me, I would give it one last try. I'd call the boss and make sure he and his team actually compared your proposal to the competitor's proposal again. Talk about all the advantages of your proposal and refute any arguments where they might be superior. Maybe you would suggest changing the project. Is your design flexible? Maybe something can be changed. You've already been rejected, so what do you have to lose by trying again?" Stephen looked at me for a long time. "You don't look like an ordinary taxi driver." I grinned. "Because I'm not a taxi driver. I work for Uber." A smile as big as mine stretched across Stephen's face. "Well, you really gave me great advice. Advice I'm going to take." I nodded, still smiling. I watched as Stephen entered the terminal. His steps seemed to lighten, and his shoulders straightened. I turned to my phone, scrolling through my Uber orders, looking for anything nearby that could take me back downtown or to the university campus. It was only when a wrinkle of disappointment appeared on my forehead that a new order appeared on the list. "Great, an order from the domestic terminal at Randwick," I said with a smile. Randwick was close to the University of New South Wales campus. It was perfect. I quickly accepted the order. The ride between terminals was short, and I was glad to see a guy waiting at the designated spot. I rolled down the window. "Richard Stroker, the one and only," I announced. Leaving the car running, I got out and, as with the previous client, took his suitcase and headed to the back of the car. "It looks like you're planning to stay a long time," I noted, nodding at the size of his luggage as I loaded it into the trunk. "Yes, I'm here for a week for an unforgettable marathon with a girl I met and hooked up with a month ago at a trade show. I'll probably spend a week without anything," he laughed. So maybe I overpacked. I did a double take at his straightforwardness. "Good for you," I replied dryly. A sideways glance at his face told me that my sarcasm had gone over his head, which was just as well. I shouldn't lose a good order just because I thought the guy was an, who am I to judge, after all. Perhaps the woman in question isn't looking for commitment the same way he is. "Is it okay if I sit in the front?" "I hate sitting in the back." "As you wish." My voice was neutral, but internally I groaned. I hoped the guy wasn't a talker. Bad luck. It's a cool car, man. I can't believe I'm riding on a date in a Rolls. "Thank you," was all I could think to respond. "So, I met this girl, sorry for the interruption." "Richard." "Call me Rich." "Okay, Rich. What street in Randwick?" Let me check." I waited for him to take the phone out of his shirt pocket. "Carrington Road." I hesitated for a moment. "Great. I know it well." So, as I said, I met this girl last month at a trade show that our company held in Melbourne. This was my first show since I'm new to the company, but she's been there for a few years and been to a few of them. The guy I replaced introduced me to her, said he had a good time with her at the last show. I was going to not listen and just make inarticulate sounds, but his words struck me. Last month, Lexi attended a conference organized by the chain of stores where she worked, also in Melbourne. Is it really a coincidence? Yes, it must be a coincidence. Melbourne probably hosts 100 or more conferences every week. Part of me wanted to go back to the original plan of ignoring him, but something small but persistent forced me to listen. She kept saying that this must be an isolated incident and that she has a boyfriend in Sydney who should never know what she gets up to in Melbourne. At that moment, his monologue was interrupted by an incoming message on his phone. "Looks like everyone went to Melbourne," he said, grinning as he read the message. As I already said, she was simply burning with impatience, just like now. I want to know if my flight arrived on time. I wanted to shut him up for his self-confidence. The guy clearly thought he was God's gift to women. She writes that her neighbor is also a little depraved. I hope she invites her. An unpleasant chill of fear crept into my stomach. I fought against it, trying not to let it take over me and negate nearly 3 years of loving and trusting Lexi. I struggled with a growing list of coincidences. Could she really do this? Not my sweet Lexi. What did I do or say to make her do this to me? Why would she want to do this? We were happy, weren't we? Heck, we were going to get married in November, in just 3 short months. The loyal part of me denied that Lexi was capable of such betrayal, but the more pragmatic, analytical side of my nature, developed through my engineering studies, analyzed the month since her return from the conference. It was a month when she was sometimes hot, sometimes cold, sometimes almost overwhelmed with love, sometimes distant and irritable. In fact, the more I thought about it, the more clearly I saw a pattern. Each trip to Melbourne resulted in a change in Lexi's behavior. Sometimes these fluctuations lasted only a week or 2, but the last time, it lasted a month and did not stop. I had always attributed it to worry about her beloved grandmother, but now my internal struggle was over. A few words from a passenger had destroyed my inner world. Her nickname was Flexible Lexi because, man, this girl was flexible. The sound of a train rushing past the platform filled my ears. An invisible clamp squeezed my chest, making breathing difficult. Years later, looking back at this moment, I still cannot understand how I managed to keep my hands on the steering wheel and avoid an accident. We're almost there, Rich. What is the house number? My voice sounded strange to my own ears, but a quick glance to the side showed that the passenger was acting normally and was checking his phone again. Number 28, apartment 7. If I had any doubts about Lexi's betrayal, Dick had just put them to rest. Confusion and anguish hit me like a tsunami. Why? Why did she do this to me? To us? I was loving and considerate. I was supportive. Sure, I had some habits that annoyed Lexi, but nothing that would justify this. My education promised me a well-paid job with excellent career prospects, even the opportunity to work abroad, which was one of Lexi's dreams. When we were ready, she would be able to leave her job and raise our children without worrying about money. I wanted to turn the car around and drive in the opposite direction, but the desire to see Lexi's betrayal kept me on course until the end, as if I were a fish and her betrayal was a hook pulling me in. I didn't understand this desire. Was it self-destructive? Perhaps it was a desire for self-preservation. Once I see it, I can't unsee it. I can't let her deceive me with lies and half-truths. I wouldn't be able to give in to her pleas, which I suspected would be numerous. Great, we'll be there in about 5 minutes, I said, surprised at my ability to speak with the storm raging in my stomach. He didn't answer. One quick glance showed why. He was typing. I couldn't read it all, but I saw enough to swallow the lump in my throat. I parked at the curb, turned off the engine, and got out of the car. I walked to the back of the car on shaky legs and took out his suitcase. Here, let me help you with this. You've got me intrigued by this hot blonde. Do you mind if I take a look at her to get me through the rest of my boring shift? This idiot laughed. No problem, dude. You can admire her as much as you want. Thank you, I said, putting on what I hoped was a smile. Lead the way. He walked with the self-confidence of a peacock, with a bag slung over his shoulder. If looks could kill, I would have turned him into ashes. But perhaps he was right, according to him, and he had no reason to lie. Lexi had already cheated on me many times. Lexi's apartment was on the 2nd floor. It took all my self-control to wait for Dick to sort things out and find the old elevator. With every second, the agony turned into rage. But this was not rage that burns and leaves devastation in its wake. No, I felt cold inside, coldness throughout my body, like Arctic ice. With every crash in my head, another shard of ice broke free and coursed through my veins. I was glad of this cold. It drove away confusion and torment. There would be a time later when I would be alone, but for now, I was grateful for the icy water of hatred flowing through my body. It was hatred for Lexi, hatred for her lies, her betrayal. Ice fury was good. It gave me strength, much better than the paralyzing emotions of pain and betrayal. The elevator creaked and groaned. Rich muttered something under his breath, and I waited silently. The doors opened slowly. Rich sighed impatiently. God, this elevator belongs in a museum. Another reason not to leave her apartment all week. Dick looked left and right, and again I had to stop myself from pointing him toward Lexi's door. We were going in the right direction. I almost laughed at Lexi's door. Rich ran a hand through his hair, straightened his clothes, and then adjusted his pants. I expected him to check his breathing. He rapped his knuckles 3 times. The last knock had barely died down before I heard Lexi answer. "Hello, lover," she stammered, looking at Richard. I took a step to the side, getting into her field of vision. I waited for her to react. "Surprised, Dick?" I said. "You were waiting for Mr. Richard Stroker to come and spend a wonderful week with you, am I right?" Rich looked puzzled, looking between Lexi and me. "Dude, what's going on?" Lexi raised her hand to cover her mouth, and her other hand reached toward me. "Thank you, Lexi. Yes, I would like to return the engagement ring I gave you in love and trust, since neither is applicable anymore." I took her outstretched hand, removed the ring from her finger, and put it in my jeans pocket. I smiled at her, the same smile she supposedly loved, before taking a step back. "I've delayed you long enough. I'll go now and leave you two to enjoy the marathon we have planned. Enjoy your night, flexible Lexi and Rich Stroker." As I turned and walked away, I heard Rich asking Lexi who I was and what the hell was going on. She muttered something unintelligible. Fine, she's crying. I hope this traitor gets cheated on many more times. I hope regret eats at her heart like acid. I got to the car, surprised at my calmness. Everything seemed so unreal. One day I was one half of a loving couple planning a wedding in less than 3 months, and the next day I was a single man. One day I was a man who thought he was loved and respected. The next day I found myself the one who was despised because contempt was the only possible interpretation of her actions. Why or how Lexi's feelings changed, I will never know, and after her betrayal, I don't want to ask her. How would I know if her words were true and not another lie for her benefit? On autopilot, I put the car in gear and turned on the turn signal. A quick glance over my shoulder, and I was off. I heard my name in the rearview mirror. I saw Lexi running barefoot down the sidewalk, still in her see-through nightdress, tears streaming down her face. I chuckled darkly. I liked it like that. In my rearview mirror, weeks passed, and Lexi followed what I called the cheating guide, texts, emails filling my inbox, and pestering my family to get me to talk to her. I ignored it all. The fact that neither her mother nor father contacted me or my parents directly suggested that they at least suspected why the previously smitten groom had suddenly called off the wedding. My mother, I think, was as devastated as I was. Despite Lexi's shortcomings in housekeeping, her mother still loved her. To be honest, my mother loved all my girlfriends. She saw in them the daughter she never had. Lexi was no exception. To her credit, despite her feelings, she never once encouraged me to listen to or forgive Lexi. The worst she did was tell me that, for my own sake, I would have to talk to Lexi one day to, as she called it, put this matter to rest. Personally, I believe that actions speak louder than words, and the way I took off the engagement ring spoke loud enough about the closure of my relationship with Lexi. Ideas of revenge were boiling in my head. I wanted her to live long enough to regret her choices, regrets about her actions, regrets about her loss. I wanted her life to be long and miserable. I wanted her to be sad and lonely. I wanted her to yearn for what she once had, for what she had so thoughtlessly thrown away. When I woke up from dreams of her loneliness and misery, dreams where she was full of remorse for what she had done to me, to us, dreams where she yearned to return to a time of innocence and happiness, I smiled without feeling guilty. Karma, I thought. Karma will catch up with her one day. Following my mother's repeated insistence that the matter be closed, I agreed to meet Lexi for coffee. Stirring sugar into my coffee, I looked around the small cafe, pleased with my choice for our first face-to-face meeting. As I lifted the cup to my lips, Lexi walked through the doors. Trust her to ruin that first sip of liquid heaven. I watched as she stopped in the doorway, looking around the room. When she saw me, she gave me one of her big smiles. I looked for signs of nervousness but found none. Was she really that sure? Perhaps she thought a beautiful smile was all it took to lure me back. In this outfit, she had chosen every detail to highlight her assets. Little did she know that her assets could no longer touch me. I was surprised at how little attraction I felt toward her. Her actions had managed to destroy 3 years of love and passion in less than a day, and almost 8 weeks later, I felt even less attracted to her now. Instead of seeing sweetness and beauty, I saw vanity and selfishness. Instead of being charmed by generosity and humor, I was disgusted by lies and betrayal. It was like picking a juicy red apple from a tree, only to find it rotten and wormy inside. Suddenly, I lost my appetite for apples. I'd lost my appetite for Lexi. If she were a lady, I would act like a gentleman and stand up to pull out a chair for her, but remaining seated helped avoid her attempts to hug me. Instead, her breasts brushed against my biceps, another sign of her seduction tactics. I stopped myself from shaking my head. I'd never thought of her as stupid before, but she clearly wasn't a tactician. Intim got her into this mess, and it certainly wasn't a tool to win me back. It would be better for her to use her mind and convince me of her repentance and seriousness. "Oh, Jamie, thank you for agreeing to meet. I've missed you. I have so much to tell you," Lexi gushed. It took all my strength not to wince. For a moment, I thought about reneging on my mother's promise to listen to Lexi. Mom was sure that one day I would be glad I gave Lexi the opportunity, since I would supposedly not have any uncertainty or unanswered questions in my heart. This assumed Lexi would be honest, which I doubted. "I'm here. I'm listening. I don't have much time, so please say whatever you want to say so we can both move on." Seeing the hurt flash across her face gave me a sense of satisfaction that I wasn't particularly proud of, but I couldn't deny that I liked it. I really wanted to leave it in my rearview mirror. "Please don't talk about moving on, Jamie. Please forgive me. We are meant for each other. I know this just as much now as I did on our first date." "Is it true?" I wanted to say more, but Lexi continued without letting me get a word in. It just dawned on me that we were only 3 months away from our wedding, and I'd never done anything crazy. Then Tiffany said it was better to do it now while I was young rather than later when we had a family. "I never intended for you to find out, and I thought that if you didn't find out, it wouldn't hurt you. You have to believe that I love you. I want to spend my life with you." It struck me that she implied her week of intimate with Stroker was her first experience with infidelity. This made me angry. Even now, she couldn't be honest. "Is it true? You have a strange way of showing it. Since when did introducing a third party into a relationship become a great romance? Do you think that if Romeo caught Juliet in bed with Maruto, he would understand and agree if she said, 'I am young, I need to sow wild oats. I'll sleep with him when you're out of town. Don't worry, I'll be careful'? Is this too high for you? What about your favorite Twilight character, Bella Swan? Do you think Edward wouldn't care if he caught her with Jacob if she said, 'Don't worry, I'm only with him when you're not around'? So please don't insult my intelligence by telling me about your love for me and our destiny together." And so it went, Lexi making all the usual excuses and rationalizations. I noted them in my mind and made counterarguments, but Lexi continued to follow her script, ignoring everything that did not suit her case. If she hadn't been so caught up in her defense, she would have noticed my lack of emotion. "You cheated on me, Lexi. No matter how you justify it, it doesn't change the fact that you cheated. You went behind my back and slept with another man. You changed. Did you change? It sounds too soft for what you did. It completely minimizes your actions. Did you change? Damn, the more I say it, the more I hate that word. Who the hell came up with this term for your act? Probably another cheater, someone who was afraid to call a spade a spade. Someone who believed that using more truthful words was too cruel, like liar, traitor, and backstabber. Well, I didn't kill anyone. Not someone, something. I sat here and listened to all your excuses and rationalizations. If I believed you, then what you did wouldn't be worse than secretly eating extra chocolate for yourself. As long as I didn't know, I wouldn't be hurt or offended, and I wouldn't feel like I was missing out on anything. What you did is much worse than cheating. You killed us. You killed our future, our plans, our dreams, our life together. You lied to the one you spent years telling you loved. You stuck a knife in my back. You betrayed our team, you and me against the world. Do you remember? You betrayed this, and with this betrayal, you killed us. So yes, you are a killer. I sat back and watched the consequences of my words. I meant each of them tenfold. I could say more. I could accuse her of lying by omission. According to Stroker, and he had no reason to lie, she had been cheating on me for much longer than a few months. But I didn't. It didn't matter to me, 1 or 100, it didn't matter. Betrayal is betrayal, a lie is a lie. She killed us the first time when she deceived me to be with another man. Watching Lexi's face was like watching a B-grade horror movie, one where someone turns into a zombie or a werewolf or some kind of ugly monster. Every emotion was immediate yet easily recognizable. Shock turned to fear, pain into guilt, shame into repentance, and despair into despair. When she reached the peak of devastation, her face seemed to collapse in on itself. She lingered for a moment before her psyche brought her back from the edge. I watched the emotions reverse. It was too painful for her to accept. I knew it from the beginning, but I will always remember her instant awareness of the full consequences of her actions. No, she whispered, her face frozen in sad denial. No. I was silent, enjoying her torment. My rage was deep because the pain it caused was just as deep. You can't have deep rage without being deeply hurt first. Unfortunately for Lexi, my rage completely eclipsed the love I once felt for her. No, she whispered again. You must forgive me. You should give me one more chance. No, I shouldn't. Please, Jamie, please don't give up on me and us. Please, I'll never do that again, Lexi pleaded. I didn't use the usual logical arguments about how I could never trust her again, that she was the one who left us, not me, or the quote that once a cheater, always a cheater. It would have been a waste of words. Now that I had this beautiful moment of watching her soul being destroyed, I wanted to leave. Of course, her conscious mind was restored in a matter of moments, and she might never fully comprehend the level of betrayal she committed against me. But the seed was planted. I saw it take root. Now all I could do was hope that her subconscious would haunt her with the truth for the rest of her life. I don't know, Lexi. You hurt me greatly. Let me think. Call me in a week or two at worst. Perhaps we could become friends over time. She gave me 4 days. I gritted my teeth and agreed to another meeting for coffee. Why? I'm not entirely sure. I think part of me was pride or maybe ego, greatly damaged by her infidelity. Seeing her unhappy and pleading was a bomb. This time, she came before me and even bought me coffee. As expected, she dressed to impress. Her only problem was that I wasn't impressed. I put a half smile on my face and silently encouraged her to talk. As she chatted nervously about her week, occasionally showing her breasts, when she asked about me, I gave short answers. I kept one hand on the cup, the other on my lap. One day, I put my free hand on the table, and she immediately grabbed it. Keeping a neutral expression, I briefly withstood her touch so as not to make a scene, then moved my hand back to my lap. Despite the need for self-esteem that her desire for reconciliation provided me, it was more difficult than I expected to be in her presence. When I looked at her, I no longer saw beauty but only ugliness. It took real determination to stay put. I lasted 30 minutes. My last sip of coffee was so cold it could be called iced coffee. Looking at my watch, I stood up. I have to go. Goodbye, Lexi. Wait, she said, also getting up. There will be a retrospective of Humphrey Bogart's films at the Palace Verona Cinema next week. I know you like them, so I was wondering if you would like to come. I'll think about it. Call me in a few days, and I'll let you know. She was right, I really liked old black and white films, as well as some classics. My father introduced me to them. He had a huge collection, Bogart, Cary Grant, and Gregory Peck, to name just a few. It was embarrassing how many times he and I watched movies like The Maltese Falcon or North by Northwest. Fine, I said. I'll go. I love you, she said as I left. I didn't turn around or answer. I was surprised when I said yes to her call a few days later. All I could do was compare myself to a moth in her desire to get me back to a flame. I despised her, but I needed her desire to return to heal my wounds. At least in the cinema, I wouldn't have to look at her or listen to her thinly disguised attempts to persuade me. Her choice of night, Wednesday, and the uncertainty of which Bogart film we'd be seeing made me curious, so I checked Verona's website. I had to laugh. She chose the movie Sabrina for us. They showed different Bogart films every night. We could have seen Casablanca, The Maltese Falcon, The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, Mutiny on the Bounty, High Sierra, or The Big Sleep if we had gone on any other day of the retrospective. They were all movies for men, or at least not romantic comedies. I rolled my eyes as I closed my laptop. What was she thinking? That I would watch Bogart fall in love with Audrey Hepburn's character and go soft, get down on one knee, and ask her to marry me again? She tried to convince me to pick her up, but I rejected it, saying I would meet her at the cinema entrance at 6:45 p.m. She didn't like it, knowing how difficult it is to find parking on Oxford Street or even nearby. I decided to take the bus. This meant that I would have to drive straight from campus and arrive a little early, but there was always a lot to see and do on this famous street, so that didn't bother me. At 6:45, I calmly walked to the cinema. As expected, Lexi was already there. I had to smile. She's not usually that punctual. "Where did you park?" she asked me after she tried to hug me, which I didn't reciprocate. She tried to kiss me on the lips, but I turned my head, and her kiss fell on my ear. I didn't park. I came by bus straight from the university. "Oh," she said disappointedly. "I was hoping that you would give me a ride home after the movie, since I came by train straight from work." "Well, you know what they say, Lexi," I said, trying to sound indifferent. "What's that?" "Never assume." She raised an eyebrow in confusion. "Never?" "Don't assume," I said, trying not to smile. "Because you're making assumptions about you and me." She tried to smile, but it wasn't very successful. "Shall we go inside?" Lexi nodded, holding out her hand. I dodged, putting my hands in my jeans pockets. She was even more unhappy when I retreated to the ticket counter for her to pay for her ticket. I didn't feel bad or ungallant about it. Technically, she invited me. 10 minutes into the movie, I realized I had made a mistake by agreeing to go with her. I spent the whole movie dodging her. I was so busy watching her try to hold my hand, get into my popcorn, put her hand on my knee, and kiss my cheek that I missed most of the movie. If Lexi was unhappy at the beginning of the evening, she was clearly annoyed by the end and did little to hide her disappointment. Watching her irritation was like taking the first sip of aloe on a burn, soothing and healing. "Fine, thanks. See you soon." "What, you won't even walk me to the bus stop?" she asked. "No. My next bus home is soon and leaves from a different stop than yours. If I miss it, I'll have to wait 40 minutes for the next one. Besides, you're a grown woman. We could grab something to eat and catch the late buses home," she suggested hopefully. "I cannot. Bye." I smiled, not at her but at the look of disappointment on her face, another layer of balm on my wounds. I turned and left. I had just now stuffed my laptop into my backpack as Bon Jovi's opening song "You Give Love a Bad Name" started playing from my pocket. I groaned. The song was an oldie but a goodie, and it seemed almost criminal that it had become Lexi's new ringtone, replacing the sappy love song she'd chosen for herself in the early days of our meetings. "Angelic smile is what you sell, you promised me heaven and then you put me through hell," the words rang out as I debated whether to answer or let it go to voicemail. The answering machine won. I was in no mood to listen to her pathetic requests to see each other again. I had things to do, and I wasn't going to ruin my life over a broken heart. Being distracted by this was one of the best parts of engineering, the ability to compartmentalize and solve one problem or question at a time. I'd deal with Lexi's latest attempt at reconciliation later. My shoulders and neck relaxed for the first time in 2 weeks. I put on my backpack and turned toward the pub where I had agreed to meet some of my friends. The afternoon breeze was pleasant on my slightly sweaty face. The room was stuffy as I approached the bar to order my first beer. Movement in the periphery of my vision caught my attention. I turned my head, hoping to see someone familiar. I didn't know her, but she was beautiful, and I held my gaze. She turned and smiled. "Careful, if you watch any longer, you'll have to buy me a drink. How about I buy you 3, because it might take a while?" "Quick," she said, laughing. "I like a guy who can think on his feet. My name is Stella." Jamie, what do you drink? I placed our order, and we chatted. Stella seemed vaguely familiar to me, perhaps we met at some lecture. Stella looked exactly as I had imagined. I admit that my idea of what Stella should look like was influenced by my addiction to watching The Fall, starring the ever-cute and mysterious Gillian Anderson as Detective Stella Gibson. Both were of average height, but that was the only thing about them that was average. Stella was not as intense as the character on the show. No, she laughed freely and often. She was smart, which only added to her overall charm. As I was laughing at another funny story about the oddities of one of Stella's lecturers, I felt a hand on my bicep. I turned around, expecting to see one of my friends. Instead, Lexi stood in front of me. Surprised, I groaned in disappointment. She looked furious, but at my groan, I saw a shadow of resentment flash across her face. Like a turned page, she quickly disappeared. What the hell are you doing, Jamie? You gave up meeting me so you could be here and flirt with. Lexi hesitated for a moment, glaring at Stella. Lexi, it's an easy choice. How can you be so cruel? If you hadn't broken off our relationship, we would have gotten married in a week. Instead of trying to work things out, do you flirt with other girls? Hey, at least I waited until I was alone, unlike someone else in this conversation. Stella and her friends fell silent. I could only imagine how awkward this scene must have been for them to watch. Go home, Lexi. I don't want to be with you on this day. I want to spend it with friends, people who are honest with me and have no intention of stabbing me in the back. I watched as the redness spread from Lexi's neck and chest to her face. It was fast, like a rushing flood in a dry riverbed. How could you? She asked, her voice breaking. With her last breath, she turned around and practically ran through the crowd, pushing people aside on her way to the exit. Taking a deep breath, I returned to Stella and her friends. Sorry for that. If I thought an apology would be enough, I was sorely mistaken. 10 minutes later, they had the whole story. Sympathy flowed, and I was handed a lot of beer. By the end of the night, Stella put me in a taxi but not before slipping her phone number into my shirt pocket. With Lexi's betrayal throwing all my plans out the window, I was somewhat directionless leading up to Christmas time, which should have been filled with wedding preparations. The wedding day and a 2-week honeymoon were now filled with work. I couldn't believe how many people I drove around Sydney who were just coming here for Christmas shopping. Have they gone crazy nowadays? Why drag through traffic jams and jostle everywhere when you can order everything online? Lexi called. Stella called. I was honest with both. Stella appreciated this. Lexi, not so much. Lexi begged me to visit her on what was to be our wedding day. My mother overheard the conversation. Forgive her. You know that doesn't mean you have to like or approve of what she did. It doesn't mean you have to be her friend in the future. It means you let go of anger and pain and all the other negative emotions it causes inside you. It means freedom for you to move on. I'll think about it, Mom. But at this point, I think telling Lexi that I forgive her will only redouble her efforts to get me back. She's already quite persistent. My mother nodded. Even if you forgive her, Jamie, you don't have to tell her. Forgiveness is for your benefit, not hers. Christmas came and went. New Year, too. I had a few coffee dates with Lexi and even bought her a Christmas card. The message was generic, but she lit up like a Christmas tree when I handed it to her. I wanted to run away when she placed a beautifully wrapped box on the table in front of me. She gave me a watch. It was a great watch, looking quite expensive with a lot of features, but I knew I would never wear it. I saw the disappointment on her face as I thanked her but closed the box instead of putting on the watch. But why? She asked. I just don't want to celebrate the New Year together, I said, and I refused to discuss it further. I sent out a few job applications, but there weren't many in January. Many engineering companies in the city are closed until mid-January. During this time, I continued to work as a driver. At least my bank account looked healthy. Throughout February and March, Lexi continued to call. She was persistent, you have to give her credit. If I had any doubts about her ability to be a top salesperson, her incessant pursuit of me dispelled them. When I felt particularly bad, which happened about every third or fourth invitation, I said yes. Nothing luxurious or romantic, usually, it was a coffee date or, once, another movie. Stella also continued to call. It was more fun. This girl had a great sense of humor. Our last date was proof of this. Imagine March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. The Irish population was going crazy, and Australians were joining them. As usual, everyone participated in the celebration, dressing in green and imitating Irish accents. Four-leaf clovers and leprechauns were everywhere. Pubs even painted their beer green. My meat pie even had green mashed potatoes in it. What did Stella make me do? Wear Waldo's costume from Where's Waldo? Yes, that's right. I ran around in a sea of green dressed like a children's cartoon character, wearing blue jeans, a red and white striped sweater, a red and white cap, a cane, and stupid round glasses. I think she paid someone in every pub we went to get me noticed. Someone was sure to shout, "Where's Waldo?" and some joker grabbed me by the arm and shouted, "There he is, Waldo." However, it did earn us quite a few free beers, and this cane really came in handy. I heard rumors after St. Patrick's Day that Lexi started talking about me, telling anyone who would listen that I was pulling her leg and cheating on her, trying to make her jealous. Was I leading her by the nose? Was I cheating on her? This made me angry. It was the last straw. Suddenly, thoughts of revenge surfaced again. Lexi, we need to talk. It is very important. Darling, you know that I'm always here for you, she said. I winced at the derogatory name and affected tone, knowing all the disgusting lies she was spreading about me, but I continued. How about tomorrow, Sunday, around 11? Sounds wonderful. I can't wait. I'll make coffee and your favorite muffins for you. Great, see you then, I said, hanging up. Arriving in front of Lexi's house, I paused for a moment to collect my thoughts. A deep breath, and I crossed the street with a spring in my step. Life was good. Lexi opened the door after the first knock. She's lucky I have a good reaction, otherwise, my second knock might have ended with me punching her in the face. Come in. I'm so glad to see you. The smell of freshly brewed coffee, and if I'm not mistaken, apple cinnamon muffins filled my nostrils. Life was definitely good. I waited until we sat down at her dining room table, coffee and muffins in hand. You won't believe this, Lexi. When this happened, you were the first person I thought of. Oh God, what? It's been a long time since I gave a ride to a guy. His name was Stephen Cummings. He was very upset because his firm had just lost a large contract they thought they had in their pocket to a competitor. I gave him a little advice. I looked at Lexi's face. Yes, she was interested in me. It turns out he followed my advice, and his company won back this large contract. That's wonderful, Jamie, she said, clearly not understanding why it was so important. But that's not all. The company he works for has offices in Sydney, Melbourne, and what's your name? New York and London. Did they offer you a job? That's right. My tone was full of joy and pride. Here in Sydney? No, in Melbourne. I didn't guess right again. Try London. Oh God, incredible. It turns out that Stephen is the chief engineer and he wants me to be his right-hand man to build a bridge outside of London. The project will take a year. They will pay for my flights and accommodation there. They will even pay for Stephen's family to move to London. Here is the corrected version.